Hello, Minnesota. Welcome back. This is the Tony Hernandez Show. I'm your host, Tony Hernandez. Today is Saturday, April 13th. And first off, I just have to say I'd say it was 4 weeks ago, or whenever Groundhog's Day was, I was lauding the groundhog and how happy I was that spring was just around the corner. And I have to say that when you're wrong, you're wrong. And I'm admitting that I was wrong. It just snowed here last week for all of us living in Minnesota. But we're just hoping and praying that the warmer weather is going to be coming any day. We have a great show today. Today I have on the show Mandy Sommer and Mr. David Watkins, and we're going to be discussing the Romeike case. The Romeike family is a family from Germany who's been living in the United States on asylum, and we're going to be discussing the issues surrounding the case, the implications, and we're also going to talk about homeschooling in America and what specifically that means. So I'm going to first bring on my guest, Mr. David Watkins. Thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it. And Mandy, thank you for being here. Yeah. So David, why don't you go first and just introduce yourself to the audience and explain a little more of who you are. And
I'd be happy to. I'm the executive director for the Minnesota Association of Christian Home Educators, and we're a statewide organization that is designed to network individuals and support groups and co-ops, and our whole goal is to promote home education and help people have the resources to learn how to do it.
Nice. And Mandy, you're a local resident here.
Yep, I'm a brand new homeschooling mom, just kind of getting my feet wet, so yeah.
Nice. And how many children do you have?
I have 3 children at the moment, 2, 4, and 6, and another one on the way in June.
Nice. And you plan on homeschooling all of them then?
Yes.
Great. Well, we'll talk a little more about that later. But before we get into too many of the details, I'm going to see, Dallas, can you put up the computer screen here? I just want to show you guys a picture here. On Saturday, last Thursday, Leona and I, we had our first sonogram visit. So that right there is the little Hernandez, the newest American at about 20 weeks. Today's his 20-week, or her 20-week birthday. And we was just incredible, though. This is another shot. This is what they call like the 4D image of the little baby, just, hanging out, chilling in utero and looking all so comforted and peaceful there. And it's just absolutely positively amazing to see just images like this, and as a father or whatever, and it just starts to really put things into perspective about what we're going to be talking here, which is really the future of our country, families, whether or not parents have the right to educate their children, and what that all means in terms of what America is about and in terms of the rest of the world and everything. And I thought maybe to start, what we would do is to pull up a video that kind of introduces the situation with the Romeike family, and that way the audience will be more familiar with the case, and then we can talk about that some more. So first, let me find it here. Hopefully it pulls up. Dallas, if you want to go hit to the computer here, we're going to play that.
The Court of Immigration Appeals turned down our asylum completely. It would mean they would send us back to Germany, where we would face the same persecution as when we left. That means we would be increasingly high fined, and we would have to face jail time if we don't pay the fines. And we might lose whatever, like house and every thing that belongs to us, we would have to lose. We would be under the threat of losing custody of our children. That means they would try to ruin our family. I would say in Germany there's basically religious freedom, but that is limited in that way that it ends at least with teaching your children. The government wants the right to impose what they think they should learn.
You get a lot of pressure. They take everything from you until at a certain point you can't even flee from Germany. So you have to bend down and do what they say, or you leave early enough when you still have the custody of your children.
For the German government, it's important to have the first right on education of children because they want to impose their worldview rather than having parents to form their children according to their worldview, which might be different.
When we first started homeschooling, my father was against it, and I'm from a big family with 12 children, and I went to public school, of course, and he was against us. He thought we should just leave it in the hands of the school, and but after a few years and after a while he helped us, and before he died he even told my sister, when I would have known earlier, we would have done it too with our children.
We are now living here in America in a very crucial time because we are seeing more and more freedoms taken away from the people by the government, because the government takes more and more control of our lives. And now if the government is saying that home education is no fundamental human right, no fundamental right that parents have, then I think that should be very alarming, because that's what we see in Germany, that the government decides what children have to learn, and if the government now decides on what children learn, and a whole generation is formed by this point of view, then that means also the next generation wouldn't believe in freedom anymore. Here in America, people are raised with that thought that we are a free country here and parents have fundamental rights. And now seeing the government taking all this away should be alarming, and the public should be standing up against this.
So that's the Romeike family case, and they were granted asylum by a U.S. federal court, and I think it was 2010. And immediately the Obama administration appealed this decision, saying that the United States should not be granting foreigners asylum in our country for this idea of homeschooling. And do you want to expand a little more about that, David?
Well, one of the things that concerns us is that they have reversed a ruling that was properly made in the first place. So the Romeikes came over with the express desire to home educate their children, and then as a result of that, be able to exercise the freedoms that they did not have in Germany. And others are going through that same crisis. Some have remained to stay in Germany, but others have fled the country. And as a result of that, there is a question as to what real educational freedom is. Do parents have the right to educate their children at home, or does the government make that decision? And we would hold the position that's a parental responsibility. Way back as far as God's concerned, He gave that responsibility to the parents, not to the government.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little more about the history specifically to Germany? Has homeschooling always been illegal in Germany, or do you know how long it has been?
Great question, Tony. In fact, it was in 1938 that Adolf Hitler outlawed homeschooling at that point. And you can see what happened after that, because once the socialist government got a hold of the children, and that was his plan, it was just a few years later, and so that everything was marching to what the government said, and as a result of that, we have a lot of freedoms that were hard fought for at that time. A lot of people lost their lives because of a worldview that was different than a biblical worldview. And Germany, it's technically illegal, and has been since that point, to homeschool. And so the Germans over in Germany now are fighting for that opportunity to make the decision to train their own children educationally.
Mm-hmm. And were the Romeikes, were they experiencing any persecution from the German government, or why did they initially flee?
They did initially flee because of a variety of issues. When you have the governmental authorities and then the social services coming down on you at the same time, creates a lot of pressure and stress. So what the Romeikes had done, they found out that the only way they could really homeschool without the harassment was to leave the country. They had been fined, the threat of their children being taken away from them, and that's very intimidating to a family. Prison time, those types of things, and there are families that are going through that today over there as well. And the Romeikes thought, we just can't continue that, and so they fled the country, seeking asylum in the United States because of our educational freedom.
Mm-hmm. And as you know, immigration is a hot button issue in American politics today. There's a lot of talk about granting amnesty to the people who are here undocumented, and now we have a case where the Obama administration is trying to deport a German family here on the case of asylum. And my question is, do we run the risk, is the Obama administration right in a way? Because if we allow for people to come here to escape homeschooling laws in their home countries, doesn't that open the door for many people to start coming here in the name of seeking homeschooling freedom? Can you expand on that?
Well, if they could actually prove the case, maybe they would have a case. The problem with the Obama administration, at least as I see it personally, is that when they can dismiss illegal immigrants and give them freedom, and yet someone who has come in legally for a political asylum, but more importantly for religious and home education side. So it's not just the educational aspect. For the Romeikes, it was also the religious aspect, because as Christians, they wanted to impart the Christian worldview to their children, and that was very important to them. And so it's really not just about education, but it's about the religious preference as well. So the Romeikes made that choice. We're going to have a Christian worldview. We have that Christian worldview, and we're going to make sure that our children understand that from an educational perspective as well as religious. So you tie the two together, so it's a little more involved than just education.
Mm-hmm. And there was a quote in the video that we just watched about Attorney General Eric Holder, and he made a statement saying that he did not believe that homeschooling was protected civil liberty. There's other issues, and we'll show a video later, but the sentiment seems to be that parents do not have this inherent right to educate their children. And do you fear that our federal government is going to start to come down on homeschooling?
Well, they've already started to come down homeschooling. We've fought for a long time for, in all the states, that every state in our union, the 50 states, has homeschool freedom now. But there's still some states that are pretty restrictive of that. But in addition, when you hear the mindset of someone like Attorney General, who really says it's not a fundamental right, well, that strikes right at the heart of the United Nations, as far as that's concerned, going back to where they established not long after the United Nations was formed that the parental decisions, parental rights involved education. Now, that's the parental choice, and so it goes back to there is a definite resistance to the parents having control, and the current administration has a little challenge with that.
And that's one of the reasons why we really appreciate that we have Mandy on the show with us today, because she gives us the perspective as a young mother Mandy, can you tell everyone again how many kids you have right
Yeah,
now?
I have 3, 2, 4, and 6-year-olds.
So you have a 2-year-old, 4-year-old, 6-year-old, and then one on the way as well?
Yes.
And when's the little one
In
due?
June.
In June.
Yeah.
So as a young mother, as an American living in the Twin Cities here, do you feel that there's pressure on you to not homeschool your child?
I wouldn't necessarily say pressure not to homeschool, but there is a lot of questioning that comes with it. A lot of people don't understand why we would homeschool when there are perfectly fine schools out there that we could be sending our kids to. So we get a little bit of that, but it's not, not too bad at this point, at least.
And can you talk a little more about the decision processes surrounding with you and your husband and your family? How did you come to the decision to homeschool? Was this something you knew before you even had your children?
We kind of did. I was homeschooled on and off throughout my school career, as were my younger brothers, and I saw a lot of the positives of homeschooling, and so it was always in the back of my head.
Such as, can you list some of those positives?
Oh, sure, like getting to stay home with your mom. That's awesome. I as a future mom had thought of that, just purely spending more time with my kids. We had more freedom to do things like field trips and stuff where you can go to the science museum or go to a park and ask questions actively with your mom, your teacher, or your dad, or whoever ends up being your teacher. But it's just more freedom to learn what you want to learn, when you want to learn it. What comes naturally into your life, you can integrate it into your schooling. And I thought it was fun. It was nice to not just be sitting in a desk hearing someone talk to you all day.
And one of the reasons why I decided to talk about this issue today on the show was I was at a family birthday party / breakfast last Sunday, and we started talking about homeschooling and back and forth, and people's passions were really ignited surrounding this issue. And one thing I found out and want to make clear is that I know multiple teachers, great teachers in the public school system, the private school system. They are sacrificing and working day in and day out and teaching our children and our students and making our society better and creating a better economy for everybody and preparing them for the future. And I believe that they feel that in some ways homeschooling is offensive to their profession. And so I guess my question for you, David, is do you have any negative sentiments to the public school education system here in Minnesota? Do you think there's areas that need fixing, or do you think that you need a separate mode for education?
Well, that's a pretty passionate subject for me, Tony, but I think that we need to be very careful to distinguish between the system and teachers. There are many good teachers that have hearts for their children. They pour energy into their children, trying to make sure that they get a good education. Their hands are tied, however, with what I call the educrats, those who are making control or taking control and making decisions that are not necessarily based on the good of the child, but on some political agenda, that type of thing. So one of the concerns we have is to make sure that the freedom that we've fought for in the United States, not just for educational freedom, but freedom in general, is passed on, and that understanding of the foundation of our country, where do we come from, what freedoms do we have, why do we have them, because our country is distinctly different. And so the educational system is that it's kind of like a manufacturing component. You have children that we're going to have some be computer operators, and we're going to have some be machinists and things like this, and it's all based on some kind of an industrial society that turns out a product rather than a person. Our concern is that we develop individual people who have the right background and educational understanding of things. They can be creative, and you can have all kinds of energy that's poured into making the economy stronger, benefiting people across the board. And so the distinguishing factor between system that turns out a product and a system, a mindset that turns out a person who is developing and has the good capability of character, et cetera, to make wise decisions.
And there was something that I read, going back to Germany, the German Supreme Court actually ruled at one point on homeschooling and why basically they supported their public school education system as the only system for Germans. And they mentioned, it was quoted that they mentioned the possibility that homeschooling opened up for creating parallel religious societies. And here in America, do we see that at all anywhere, David?
Well, yeah, polarization, probably more than parallel societies. If you promote the wrong thing, you're going to get the wrong product. And so I think a lot of times people have to understand that a well-educated homeschooled child is going to be well-grounded. He's going to understand things. He's going to be able to not be afraid to look at another worldview based on the one he has. And from our standpoint, it's a Christian perspective, and we think the Bible wins every time if it's properly understood. So you take a look at those kind of things. I think that's a big issue that we have to consider.
And then, so yeah, Mandy, going back to this same issue, like as Christians, as Americans or family members, whether we like it or not, we are called to take part in our civic society. We all have a duty to take care of our brothers and sisters across our families and across ethnic lines, and to take care of our fellow Americans. So does that compute or calculate at all with you in the decision whether to homeschool or not, in terms of taking part in our civic society versus isolating ourselves from it?
Yeah, actually, I think that homeschooling gives you a bigger opportunity to be involved in your community, in politics, in whatever you're interested in. If you're sitting in school all day, you can't go out to those meetings or get as involved as you would be able to at home. That's a big plus for us too, definitely.
And David, what do you think about that? I mean, are we called to take part in civic society, and doesn't that include Christians taking part in the public school education system?
Yeah, definitely, Tony. I mean, I'm a Christian. I'm not apologetic about that. I know people who aren't Christians. I respect the fact that's their decision that they need to make. But we have to understand from those who are believers, who hold the Word of God as the authority, and are connected to local churches and things like this, we have to realize that our responsibility doesn't stop at the church door on Sunday morning we walk out. And too much of the time we feel like there's this dividing where the common, the church and state division type of thing. And Thomas Jefferson, when he made that comment, wrote to the Danbury Baptist that letter and said there'd be a wall of separation between church and state, he meant that the church should not control the state and the state should not control the church. Totally different from what we hear today. But to be involved, if you're a lifestyle, if you have a mindset of something, you're going to live that mindset out. Whether you're in political realm or the economic realm or whatever, you're going to live that mindset out. So it's impossible for us to divide who we are inside versus what we say outside. It's going to come out.
So now we're going to line up a video that was recently played on MSNBC. It was an MSNBC host, and we're going to talk about kind of the message that was chosen. And I don't believe she has apologized for these specific comments. In fact, has doubled up on them. So Dallas, if you have the video, if we want to play it for our audience here.
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
Mandy, will you react to that?
Well, first time I heard it, I was kind of mad. Not that I'm any less mad, I guess, but that feels so much different than how I believe. I think that our kids are our responsibility, that training our kids, raising them up the way that we feel is appropriate is way more important than letting everyone have a little bit of say in your kid's life. I mean, we don't agree with everybody else. Not everybody is going to always have the same values as your own family. And what's more important than teaching your kids your own values and giving them an opportunity to, decide where they want to go with that in their life. That's part of it, but we have a huge responsibility to teach our kids what we want them to know and not leave it up to everybody else.
And David, is this MSNBC just using insightful messaging to rouse their base and create better programming for their viewing audience, or is this a real sentiment that people are feeling out there here in the Twin Cities and beyond?
Well, I think there could maybe both and, Tony, because of the fact that I think the mindset is revealed in what she said there, because there is an element in society that really believes it's not a parental role for the parents to be parents. I mean, it sounds a little bit goofy, but in reality, what she's saying is we know better than you how to raise your children. And that just strikes against every common core value. I shouldn't use common core, that's an educational term, but every core value that we have. I mean, what mother wouldn't fight for her children when something's going on? And what father, and a good father, is going to protect his family? And yet the educational system, I say system now, really believes that it, quote, takes a village to raise a child. Well, that's not true in the way they mean it. And does it mean that we are not interactive with society, or does it mean we're not involved in church? And no, not at all. It means that we're very engaged, but we're not going to be turning out, again, an institutional product. We're dealing with people here. And that's, I think there's a philosophical difference.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's shift the conversation back to here in Minnesota. And I'm more curious, Mandy, I want to hear more about the processes, because you're just getting started in this homeschooling adventure. You have a 6-year-old just starting now. And do you have to, well, first of all, do you have to register into the system, into the public school system, even if you do homeschool?
Yes, in Minnesota, you do need to register with your school district, with your superintendent, and work out certain things like standardized testing through them. And like you said, I'm still getting into all of the legalities and everything, so I'm glad that you're here. I can learn from you today. But yeah, you do have to be in the school system, registered after you turn 7. I believe it's the school year after you turn 7.
Yes, October 1.
So, yes.
And how do you learn how to do it? I mean, did you study how to be a teacher, or do you need to be a teacher?
You don't need to be a teacher, not in Minnesota. That's one of the requirements is a parent can teach their kids. So I'm not a teacher, but I've gotten most of my information online. There's 1,000,001 websites that you can go to that kind of sum up everything, and so that's where I've gotten my education on it so far.
Mm-hmm. And David, do you find that most parents are pretty adept to being able to teach their kids? Or?
I think the vast majority are well adapted to teach their children. All they need to do is to stay one step ahead of their child. So if they're not good readers, they can learn how to be a good reader also. It's as much for the parents as it is for the children sometimes. But there are a lot of resources out there, and Mandy's right. There are so many resources that are available to help communicate that. The mindset of the government school system is that, well, we are teachers and we know how to teach. Well, I know a lot of teachers, public school teachers, who are home educating their children, and what they report to me is harder for them because they've been trained, here's the way you do it. And all of a sudden they find out, well, this doesn't work for my child. This doesn't work for my family. And it's kind of a relearning process because, again, we're not turning out machinery here. We're dealing with people. And the child might have a kinesthetic learning style. He may have an auditory learning style. He may be visually motivated. And so the parent kind of learns how to best address his child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one of the stereotypes that's out there, too, is that homeschooling is abuse. Have you ever heard that before?
Yeah, to some extent.
And I mean, I guess just to put it out there, are there any cases out there? There has got to be, of some parents who say they're homeschooling and they're neglecting their children. Is this very common, David?
There are not very many cases there. There are cases where the ones that the media kind of blows out of proportion are those who say they're homeschooling, but they're not. They're really truant, but they decided that they were going to be homeschooled because they didn't want to put up with the hassle of the truancy charges and things like this. Those are not true home educators. Those are the ones that are trying to buck the system, and they need to be accountable for that particular thing, and we would wholeheartedly agree with that. But the idea that homeschoolers are hiding in the closet somewhere beating their children, this type of thing is totally false. Again, that's a media myth.
And, just to go on top of that, then the other argument I've heard against homeschooling is that you're creating, like the German Supreme Court said, that you're creating a counterculture. You're creating generations of students that aren't adapted to the mainstream culture. Does that worry you at all?
Not at all. I have lots of relatives and friends who are homeschooled, and I can honestly say that my friends who have older homeschoolers, or my cousins who have been homeschooled or whatever, they are some of the most social people I know. They are well-rounded. They can talk to a 2-year-old or an 80-year-old, and it doesn't matter. They are very well, in the loop. They're not tucked away in a corner at home, not knowing how to interact with everybody else, and that's probably the least of my worries, actually.
And since we're coming to the end of our time here, David, I wanted to give you the opportunity to once again talk a little more about your organization and some upcoming events that are coming. So,
well, I appreciate that, Tony. We have an annual conference this year's in Rochester, and we're expecting 5,000 plus people there. We deal with workshops that will help moms and dads learn how to do certain things. There are workshops about how to begin homeschooling, the workshops about how to teach high school, what about special learners, those who have learning disabilities, for instance. There are resources available in our exhibit hall, well over 100 booths that will be there. Some of those individuals have actually written the material. They explain how to use it. The parents can come deal with handling the curriculum. They can talk about those who have questions, deal with veteran homeschoolers that are there. So there's something for the beginner, and there's something for the one who's still teaching their child in college. It's a great opportunity to have a part in that.
Sounds great. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on the show. Andy, appreciate you being on as well, and hope to see you both again soon.
Very good. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
It's good stuff, and thank my guests for coming on. And we're going to bring on Sam Wayne Pierce, who was absent last week. He had end of the year basketball party. So we're going to recap the NCAA Final Four basketball tournament. And we're going to also talk about some other things. And so Dallas, we're going to try to bring Sam on right now. And I should say too, Jake, who's here with us every single week, he's on military duty this particular weekend. So Jake Duesenberg will not be giving us his weekly financial presentation. Last week, what he was talking about was just phenomenal. He was talking about the unemployment numbers and how what appears to be so isn't necessarily always the case, because the unemployment figure went down from 7.7 to 7.6%, but Jake showed us that because the economy is actually creating less jobs and more people are giving up on finding jobs, that the job situation is actually becoming worse here. So Dallas, do we have Sam lined up here? Sam Pierce, can you hear me?
Abortion.
Hi, Tony.
Other women's
Hey, how are you?
services has said.
Good. Hello, Minnesota.
Hello, how are you, Sam? I missed you last week.
I know. I missed being here. I've gotten used to it. I really enjoy it every week. The highlight of my week.
So where were you last week again?
I am the captain of the Steve's basketball team and had to attend our year-end party, which is always on Final Four Saturday. So I apologize for not making a brief appearance last week.
And how did the party go?
Party was excellent. I wanted to see Syracuse beat Michigan. They did not, but that's okay. And I was surprised that Wichita State played Louisville so tough. But I thought we got an excellent national championship game. I don't know if you got the chance to watch, Tony, but I thought it was a wonderful game, and I hope if any of your viewers picked up on the college basketball tournament this year that they watched, because they got a treat.
Yeah, I should say too, Sam, I owe you a huge debt of gratitude that in our office pool for the NCAA tournament bracket, I actually was the co-winner. So I won a much-needed $45, and I owe it all a lot of you for opening my eyes to some of the big teams, and you allowed me to make some of the big picks. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, I felt bad for you when Ohio State went down to Wichita State, even though I liked seeing the underdog win that matchup. But I knew that was rough for your bracket. But it sounds like you still did all right.
Yeah, I was pretty happy about that. So, like I said, $45 for Leona and I was much needed, especially since we've had a couple strokes of bad luck lately in terms of our vehicle. You know how that can always happen. You get unexpected vehicle expenses, and next thing you know, like you win $45 at a bracket, and you get all happy about that. So,
hey, and winning's always fun, right?
It is. So, Sam, have you been paying attention to anything that's going on with baseball?
A little bit. I was sad to see the tournament end, and I am getting a little excited for the NBA playoffs, which will start up shortly. But obviously baseball has begun. I did see that the Twins got off to a great start because they took 2 out of 3 from the Tigers, only losing the opener to Verlander, and he beats everyone. And then they took 2 out of 3 from the Orioles, but then they've lost 4 in a row now. So I don't know what's in store for the Twins. I do know that getting swept by the Royals was a little unexpected. But Kansas City seems to be pretty competitive this year. So the Twins are playing in a division now with Detroit and Chicago, the White Sox, and Minnesota, and Cleveland's not bad. And now if the Royals are going to be competitive, they were in first place in the Central going into today, the Twins might be in for a pretty tough season. So I assume you have a lot of Twins fans as viewers, and they know that already, but we'll see.
I get to I'm going to the game Tuesday night, and I'm going to be going to Twin Stadium. Got tickets to sit in the suite, so it's indoors, which is good because it's been snowing here in Minnesota lately, so it hasn't been the greatest baseball watching weather. But yeah, so I'll be there Tuesday night in the suite, and I hope they win because they just haven't been pulling too many victories off lately.
Well, the good news is, Tony, and those of your viewers that are Twins fans will know this already, and those that are casual fans may not. They got Scott Diamond back today, who was a rookie last year, and it turns out he was their best pitcher as a rookie. And he started the season injured, and he came back today, and he was very good through about 4 innings. He didn't give up any runs. I'm actually have an eye on the game right now, courtesy of the Sports New York network, since they're playing the Mets. They've given up a few runs now. But the good news is at least they got one of their better pitchers back. So we'll see. As you know, baseball's a long season, 162 games. So we can't be too happy or disappointed either end of the spectrum based on the first week of the season.
Yeah, in baseball, it's the kind of sport where it's way different in the spring than it is in the summer, than it is in the fall. Even the little things. I remember playing baseball as a 7th grader, 8th grader in the springtime in Minnesota. It was terrible. It would be like 30 degrees out, and you're up there, with the bat, and you get a pitch, and you hit it, and you hit the bat, and you hit the ball, and it actually makes it that vibrating thing where your whole hands start vibrating, and it hurts so bad. You don't even want to hit the ball. It's so cold, you don't even want to hit the ball, which kind of defeats like the whole point of the game.
Well, how about when the sting of the ball goes through the mitt in that cold weather, and it hits you right in the palm of your hand, and it hurts when it's that cold.
Yeah, so. Or you get the parent who's playing pitcher for the first time of the year, and they bean you a couple times. That always hurts, too.
So, Tony, you've been doing a lot of basketball coaching. Are you? And I know you like to ump. Are you ever going to get back into baseball coaching?
Actually, I was talking to Mandy about that off camera when she first arrived here at the studio. I don't know about coaching baseball. It kind of moves a little slow for me, but yeah, I've been umpiring since, I've probably been umpiring since I was in 2nd grade. something I used to do in the summers to make, you know, 15, 25 bucks a game or whatever it was. And it's something I kind of rose to and did different levels, higher and higher levels. I did Babe Ruth. I've done some high school games. I've done girls fast pitch, and I really enjoy umpiring. I think it's a great job. It's a great way to make extra cash. But it is, again, it's dangerous. You know, that's the one thing that I don't like about it is you're sitting behind these catchers, and you're completely protected by the good catchers. Like if there's a good catcher, it's no problem. They'll block the balls. It's when you're doing the younger grades, and you know the coach just wants to play everybody, so they put the kid in catching who's never had catcher's gear on their entire life, and then they have the kid pitching who's throwing 67, 70 mile per hour fastballs, and he'll just come down and gun it. Meanwhile, the catcher does the ole, and you're just sitting there watching a ball come straight at you. Or, you know, I've gotten injured actually quite a few times umpiring baseball. Another time was the kid, you know, the tick ball fouls when you swing the bat and it ticks the ball and it kind of flies back. Well, when you do that, the ball has a top spin, so it comes like this. So it'll go like that a little bit. So I was there umpiring like this, you know, getting ready to call a ball or strike. It was a tick ball strike. It came back and boom, hit me right square on the top of the head. You know, everything kind of went a little gray for a while. And of course, nobody cares about the umpire. You know, people are like, are you all right, ump? You know, like just kind of brush it off and you just have to keep going. But, you know, I like it. I don't know if I'll ever put the pads on again. I'm not quite sure about that. Have you ever done it, Wayne?
I have not umped a baseball game. No. I spend a lot of time on the basketball court, even in my old age, and running, of course, but have not umped a baseball game.
So you're still to this day, you're still doing it then?
I'm still doing it. I play in a fairly competitive men's league for basketball, and I do some pretty serious running training. I wanted to. I don't know if your viewers know this, so I think we need to tell them that when I owed you a phone call this morning, and I got back from marathon training, and I'd done about 11 miles, and I knew I needed to call Tony. And I call you, and you sound like a little winded, and you said, hey, Wayne, I'm out running. And you carried on with the conversation, and I just thought that was incredible, that you could have a production conversation related to the show as you were getting your running in. So if you can multitask to include your exercise, I think I'm actually with the. I give you a lot of credit, and I think I'm with the First Lady on this one. Americans need more exercise, and if you can plan a show and exercise at the same time, I think we all need to get out there a little more.
Yeah, it's called multitasking, and I would have never have thought. I remember talking to you when you first started running, and you were telling me how, you know, essentially you felt like almost like you were getting the running bug, or you were becoming, you know, addicted in a way to running, where you felt like you had to do it, and you were telling me how great it would be to go run with a group of people for like 10 or 15 miles, and like you were telling me this, and I remember in the back of my head I was thinking, you know, Sam, are you sure you're not going crazy or something? And because I wasn't running at that point, and then I don't know what it was. I think I was dealing with some kind of stressful situations, and all of a sudden I just started to run, and I realized, I think I caught exactly what it was that you were talking about. Because now I feel like I need to run at least every other day, if not more. You know, I probably run like 4 to 6 times a week, and it's really something that like I almost feel like this drive to do. Do you feel that same way?
I do, and it's unfortunate that we're getting old because some days your knees or your ankles or some body part doesn't want to just let you go run 9 or 10 miles. But it is it's addictive, and it's hard to explain. But I get it every year. And I try, you know, as of late, I do at least a marathon or a half marathon and a series of other races. And I would say to anyone that's interested, just give it a shot. It sounds so daunting, and it's crazy how fast you build this base, and you get to the point where you can run 5 miles, even if you've never run before. And then you can do 7 or 8, and remember the first time you did double digits, how happy you were, and you felt so accomplished. And something takes place in your brain, in your head, with those endorphins and what exercise does for you. And that sense of accomplishment and the chemicals in your brain that exercise works up, you just get hooked. And I think it's a really great thing. And I'm encouraged when you see the popularity of running, how it's taken off in this country, and these run groups where people that have never run 3 miles 6 months later are running a marathon for the first time in their lives. And I just wanted to, you said you couldn't remember exactly why you started running, and maybe you were stressed out. You were also running for office. That's a pretty stressful time. So I think those went hand in hand pretty well for you.
Yeah, and in hindsight, I didn't train as much as I think that I should have, just due to time restrictions and whatnot, and I didn't do as good in the marathon as I thought that I would have. The first 15 miles I was cruising, and I think my downfall was, and you warned me against this too, Sam, you warned me against this. My downfall was, at the beginning, I started running too hard. And I felt so great at the beginning, and I think I was running just a little bit faster pace than what I was used to, and it caught up to me. And psychologically, something happened to me too at around 16, 17 miles, where I was supposed to meet Leona, actually. She was going to give me my goo gels, or whatever you call them. Yeah. And so she was going to meet me at like mile 5. I get to mile 5, Leona's nowhere in sight. I get to mile 7, I'm like, where's Leona? Mile 8, mile 9, mile 10, I couldn't find Leona, because she was always getting to the point where I was, and I was already past that point.
You were too fast?
What's that? I was running too fast, yeah. That was my problem. And then, so I in my head, I didn't get my gel, or the energy stuff, and I think that kind of started to play tricks on me. And then the real kicker, though, was when we were still in Minneapolis, and we get to the Lake Street Bridge, and that's right by where I used to live, and I thought you cross over the Lake Street Bridge and go into St. Paul. So psychologically, I could see the whole remainder of the trek. Well, we get to the Lake Street Bridge, and everybody kept going. And I realized that you don't cross over at the Lake Street Bridge, you actually cross over into St. Paul at the Franklin Bridge, which added about 2 miles, and that's when my legs started cramping up. Next thing you know, I found myself like on the boulevard, like, with one of my legs spasming and various other things happening. But, I made it. And I'm thinking about running again. I really am.
Yeah. And that's normal, because you did it, and you know how fast you did it, and you say to yourself, you end up picking the 3 or 4 things that maybe you could do better. And what could you do to run a little faster? And that's normal. It's fun, though. It's really fun. So I commend you. You ran for Congress and ran a marathon in the same fall. That's
but my 2 goals, they weren't accomplished, though. I actually want to win an election, and I want to run a marathon under. Have you run one? How many have you run, Sam?
I've only run one full.
And what time did you get, if you don't mind me asking?
No problem. I ran it in 4 hours and 1 minute.
4 hours. What were you shooting for?
Well, I would have loved to have gone under 4. I would have been so happy. And I ran Lake Placid in upstate New York, where the Olympics were held. And as you're running, you see the old ski jumps, and it's pretty hilly, and it's a tough course. So on a course like that, if I could have gone under 4, I would have been very happy. And I just missed it. So the following year, which was last year, just to illustrate how difficult it is, I ran the fastest 10K of my life, which was a 6.2 mile race. I flew. I ran a fast 4 mile race. I ran a relay when I had to run about 15 miles in one day in 3 different races, and felt great. A few weeks before running the Lake Placid Marathon again for the 2nd straight year, with the intent to just go back there and get myself down under 4 hours into the 3, I had my calves cramp up one day, and it was just so painful. And it was on about mile 17 of an 18, 19 mile day. Mm-hmm. I had to stop and walk, and it really set. And it was a few weeks from the race, and I wound up going up there and running a pretty decent half marathon pace, but everything has to go right when you're training for a marathon. So many things can happen over the months that you train. You can be having a great training session, and then all of a sudden something goes wrong with your body, and you just aren't ready to do the race. You could be having a not so great training session, but just go out and have the race of your life the day of the marathon, which that probably only happens if you've done a couple and have a couple under your belt and your body's used to it. But so when you said, well, I didn't run as fast as I want to, you have to remember as your first time, you went out and you finished. Some people don't. Some people don't finish their first one.
Yeah.
And they hit a wall, like you said, at 16 or 17 or whatever. And remember when you're finishing and you're passing people that are walking, and you feel so bad for them because you know how much work they've put into it.
Yeah.
So,
well, I know this is you're coming down the miles 16 to 23 were horrible. Then at 23, I met Abigail, who's my sister-in-law. She gave me a couple ibuprofens. That helped out wonders. If I would have had those with me during the run, it would have been much better. And then the other thing that I had when I was coming towards the end was right around the governor's mansion. I look over and these people had, instead of handing out water and Gatorade to people, they actually had cold beer. And I had just one glass of beer like this big, and I just kind of slammed it while I was running. And I tell you, that last mile and a half, I felt like I was flying. It was unbelievable.
Needed the carbs.
But Sam, I wanted to switch base a little bit here because you and I were talking about something on the phone earlier that I think is really important. In Minnesota, we funded the Viking Stadium. At least 1/3 of it, roughly, is coming from taxpayers' funds. And in specific, what Governor Dayton did was he set up electronic pull tabs, e-pull tabs, and e-gambling as a way that the state of Minnesota was actually going to fund the taxpayers' portion of the stadium. Now, these e-pull tabs are not very popular right now. They estimated something like $34 million would be brought in, and it's barely brought in, I think, around 8 or 9 million right now, falling way, way short. When people ask people across the state of Minnesota, why aren't you playing e-pull tabs? And people, they say it bluntly. They like actually opening up the pull tabs, having the physical ones. This is in greater Minnesota in like lodge bars and, just kind of bars across the state. And what I wanted to talk about with you is this idea of the state being involved in gambling. First of all, do you think that's a good idea, even if it is funding stadiums?
I think it's tricky, but I think if well regulated, but also maybe with some management by some private sector companies, then I think it's a great idea. You're talking about you're talking about sports booking, or you're talking about just in general the state being involved with any sort of legalized gambling?
Well, I mean, here, for instance, in Minnesota, I cannot set up a private business in St. Paul or anywhere that involves gambling. Mm-hmm. The gambling licenses are limited to the Native Americans and to the state of Minnesota, and to a certain degree, Canterbury Downs or the horse racing stuff. But other than that, the private sector can't set up any sort of gambling operations or anything. And I'm wondering, is that a good idea to have the state have just a monopoly on the gambling, even if it is for building stadiums?
I would say no. Why is it? Well, this is a whole other topic, but I think that's a really dangerous approach to say to the Native Americans, you can have it, but no one else. If it's so bad for anybody else to be in that business and for the state to have regulations for it and oversee it and hopefully tax it and bring in some revenue, why is it okay for one group and nobody else? Why is it okay for a horse racing industry but no other industries? And we've heard a lot in recent years, probably about 2 years, that the government is involved too much in picking winners and losers. So if gambling is bad, and there's plenty of evidence to suggest that, but if gambling's bad...
Do you think it's bad, Sam?
I think alcohol can be bad. we everything in moderation, right, Tony? I mean, you participated in a pool, and it was probably $5 or $3 or whatever it was to join your college basketball pool in the office.
$10. Yep.
And you won $45. So does that mean you have a gambling problem because you spent $10 on an office pool? Because you could have lost just as easily as you won.
Yeah.
And if you had lost $10, does that mean you have a gambling problem? I don't think so.
Unless it's your last $10.
Well, okay. So if it was your last $10, then that's bad. But if you take your last $10 and walk into a bar and spend it on 4 shots of tequila and then go drive home and hurt yourself or someone else, that's terrible. But it happens all the time. So let me get back to the gambling thing. If gambling's bad, then why can the horse races allow it? And why can you have casinos run by Native Americans? And why can, I think on the Mississippi River, there are special deals for the riverboat casinos sometimes in certain states. If gambling's bad, it should be bad for everyone. No one should be allowed to run a casino or a riverboat gambling or a sports book or whatever it might be. Why is government picking and choosing who can set up shop and participate in that business? And that's what bothers me.
Well, that's a great question, Sam. Can you answer it? Why is the government doing that?
I can't. I assume that we get into a pretty sensitive, I live in New York State, and the Oneidas and some of the Native Americans, that's the only place where you can go gamble in a casino. Through a Native American casino, and I think they often get lucrative tax deals or breaks, I should say. You can sell cigarettes, no tax. You can sell gasoline, no tax. It's a polarizing issue here, and I would imagine in other parts of the country too. If those things are bad, like gambling and cigarettes, why do we say to one segment of the population, we've determined as your government that it's really bad for everyone, but we're going to let you profit off of it? And again, this is probably a sensitive issue, so I'm careful with my words. I assume it's that this is deep rooted in. There's some history here, and some sort of political deal has been made for the sake of satisfying real or conceived agendas from decades or centuries ago.
Well, so in New York, can you set up a private gambling business if you wanted to in Syracuse or wherever?
No, of course not. You can't just set up shop. You can't just set up your own casino or sports book or any sort of car. You can't set up a shop to host poker games. No one can do those sorts of things, but you can go out to certain reservation areas and walk in the door and place bets.
So what about like the office pool, like the NCAA Final Four bracket? Is that legal?
Several years ago, Congress, I think, passed a law to exclude, and I think it actually, I can look this up and come back to you next week with it if you want, but I think that Congress actually passed legislation to legalize the office pool because it was a situation where it was so prevalent and I think viewed as relatively harmless. And also, in the office pool setting, no one is profiting on that if they're doing it the right way. So the guy that runs the office pool isn't taking a cut. And typically that's where the government would be really upset is now, if someone were running the office pool and they were taking a cut, so you said you won $45 and another gentleman did too, if that wasn't the total in the pool, if the guy that's running it, in addition to paying you your winnings, also took a cut, then it's probably illegal.
Huh. Well, Sam, that's where we're going to have to end our conversation now. So I certainly appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate everybody watching the Tony Hernandez Show. We broadcast live every Saturday from 4 o'clock until 5 o'clock. We also rebroadcast on YouTube, Tony Hernandez Show, SPNN in St. Paul. May God bless you. May God bless America. And vaya con Dios. Thanks, Wayne.
Hey,